Hello my friends and welcome back to my channel. So today's video is one that I am pretty excited about. This is actually a video that I thought about how I really wanted to film it because we're going to be talking about some of my favorite romance book series, and I decided to sort of go with romance book series that I had either recently finished or that I hadn't really talked about a lot. I feel like I've had this booktube channel this will be my second year actually, which is crazy. And I feel like at times I do, in the early days of my channel, like I talked about the same series like over and over and over again. And I feel like that's just sort of how it goes. When you fall in love with a book series and you make bookish content, you're going to be talking about the books that you love a lot. So anyway, this is a very rambly intro, but I am going to be talking about romance book series that I recently finished and fell in love with. Or that are, even if they're an ongoing series, if I've read up to the current book that's out, I'm going to be talking about those too. So this is not an exhaustive list of all of my favorite romance book series. These are ones that are currently on my mind a lot right now. So, however, all of that being said, I do want to highlight my favorite historical romance series, which I have done videos about, quite a lot of them, and my favorite contemporary romance series, which I also have done guides to. I have a guide to both of these authors. I have guide videos to both of these authors. I'll have those guide videos linked down below. So the first series I'm going to mention is Lisa Kleypas, the Ravenel series. This is my favorite historical romance series. It's just so lovely and beautiful. I feel like there's such a wonderful story being told here with all of the families, with the intertwining families. You have some of the wallflowers show up in here with their children, St. Vincent. And it's just so absolutely lovely and compelling. These two are definitely my favorite books in the series. Chasing Cassandra and Devil's Daughter. These are what I consider to be some of Lisa Kleypas' best work. I feel like they're breathtakingly romantic. The heroes are so swoony, but they're also just like so completely enraptured with the women in their lives, and I just adore the story that's being told here. I love how this one is Phoebe. This is St. Vincent's daughter. She's a widow. I love this one. We have Cassandra in here, who is a plus-size heroine, and the man who falls in love with her, Tom, who thinks that there's no way he's going to fall in love with anybody, and of course he does, and it's shocking to him when he falls in love with Cassandra. They're just so beautiful. I love them so much. And also, of course, Pandora's book, which is just delightful, and I love it so freaking much. So, in case you were wondering what my favorite historical romance series is, it's The Ravenels by Lisa Kleypas. It's fantastic. It's my all-time favorite. And now I'm sure, if you've been here, if you know me, this is not going to be any surprise what my favorite contemporary romance series is, and it is the Grip Trilogy by Kennedy Ryan. You really do need to read all three books to get the complete story that's being told between Grip and Bristol. So the first one is Flow. It's just a short novella. Special shouts out to Jessin for sending me these beautiful original covers, which I love so much. So the first one is Flow. You need to read it. It's very short. All of these are available on audio, and I think they're still on Kindle Unlimited too. And then Grip is the second book, and then Still is the last book. And if you have started this series and you haven't made your way to Still, like, please read Still. This series is about a rapper, a black man who is a rapper, and the white woman who is his manager, but she actually is the sister of the friend who was also a musician. And it's their romance over time, like many, many years. And this series encapsulates every single thing that I love about romance novels. It's so beautiful. It's about them overcoming life and sticking with one another throughout good times and some really, really bad times. Their happily ever after is so beautiful. It does deal with some very heavy topics. It talks about racial injustices. It talks about some traumatic experiences in marriage life and things surrounding that. It's just so absolutely beautiful. This is my all-time favorite series. Still is my all-time favorite book. Favorite contemporary romance series right here. Okay, so let's actually carry on to the other series that maybe you haven't heard me gush about so much, and one that I recently finished is actually the Kingmaker series by Sophie Lark. This is a series of 4 books. There is a 5th book that will be coming, but it could be, I believe she said that it could be a standalone. It's called The Savage, featuring characters that you see in The Spy. The Kingmaker series by Sophie Lark is basically a spin-off series from her Brutal Birthright series. So the Brutal Birthright series is, I believe, like a 9 or 6 book, maybe it's 6 books, I can't exactly. It's a long series of books. And they're all about mafia romances, different mafia families and different couples, and how there's like the sort of the political aspect of the mafia world. And when you get to the last book in the Brutal Birthright series, which I think the last book for sure is essential to read before you move on to this series, because it sets the stage for the dynamics that these characters have. These are children from the parents in the Brutal Birthright series, but they're not kids, right? They're 20-year-old, 22, 23. They're basically at university, so these are sort of like a new adult. And I think it's interesting that I have a new adult series on here, because I've talked many times about how typically new adult books don't work for me much anymore. But this series, I feel like, transcends new adult. But that's the age range that the characters are in. They're in their early 20s. They're fairly young. They're just stepping out into the world and finding out about themselves for the first time. So we have these children who have come from the Brutal Birthright parents, and they're all sent to this academy, this boarding school, basically, that's on this remote island. Nobody really knows where it is, and it is a university setting where they are taught how to be leaders in the mafia. So they have different classes and different sectors. So they have heirs, who would be like the top boss, the mafia boss for men and women who would take over the mafia. You have spies, you have enforcers, you have all of these different categories and classes. And it's very, very interesting. I think it's such a fun and intriguing setup to have this school that is sort of reminiscent of Hogwarts, that it's this boarding school all these mafia kids come to learn about how to be like professional criminals. Like, it's a pretty cool concept. But the concept alone didn't really sell me on this, because I had heard so many great things about this. My friends Jen and Jessen love the series, and especially because of all the twists and mysteries that are involved. The romances obviously are amazing, but I truly, truly feel like this series is a masterpiece. I think that this is Sophie Lark at her best. I think she has an excellent sense of plotting and telling an overall story throughout these 4 books. There's so many mysteries here that you just sort of peel back layer after layer on each single book. And something that I deeply love about this series is how surprising it is. Like, I love nothing more than being surprised by something that happens in a plot. Something that I wasn't expecting, but also something that doesn't just come out of left field, you know? And I think something that Sophie does in this series that is extremely clever is that she has laid breadcrumbs, very, very tiny breadcrumbs, some very tiny, some very big, throughout this whole series, so that when you get to the final book, you're just sort of like, oh, I didn't see that coming, but it makes sense, and I just love that so much. But, so as just a storytelling series, these are fantastic. But again, Sophie takes it to another level, because the romances she's telling in here are captivating. They're steamy. They're soulmate level love. There really is this overall theme of finding your person here at such a young age. Some who come from rival families, some who have, you know, different roadblocks standing in their way that prevent them from being with the person that they want to be with. One of the big standout books for me is The Bully, which I know is a fan favorite. This is definitely a bully romance, and I know some people have read this one alone, but I really don't think you should. I really feel like to get this character's redemption arc, the hero, Dean, you absolutely have to read The Heir and then The Rebel to get his full redemption arc and to get satisfied with him at the end of this. So maybe you're thinking, well, okay, so we have to read 3 books to get one character's redemption arc, but then what happens in The Spy? And in The Spy, there is a huge mystery reveal. There's just like all of these revelations, and it's so satisfying, and the romance in here is unlike any of the other romances, and it was perfection as well. I love and adore this series. I think it's so fantastic, and I think that this is a series that is hyped up a lot, and I really feel like it's for good reason. So if you want to read this series, at bare minimum, if you haven't read her Brutal Birthright series and you don't want to, because I know 6 books is a big investment, if you want to read this series, I think that you should definitely read Ivan and Snow. Those are 2 books that you kind of need to read to get the background for what's going to happen with the overall plot in here. They're pretty short reads, they are on Kindle Unlimited, and they're good. Ivan is one of my favorite books by Sophie Lark, but you're going to want to read those before you get into this series for sure. At bare minimum, you have to read those 2 books, okay? I know, I'm giving you homework assignments, but seriously, I want everybody to read, all of my booktube friends that are watching me who maybe don't love mafia romances or who maybe are here mostly for my historical romance content, which I love and adore, and I'm so glad you're here. But seriously, give this series a try. I think that it's talked about a lot for a really good reason. It's fantastic, and I love it. Okay, another series that I recently finished that I actually have been talking quite a lot about is the Fitzhugh series by Sherry Thomas. So Sherry Thomas is an incredible writer. She has a real gift at putting words together that feel lush, that convey emotion, that are really excellent, not only at just being beautiful words strung together, but that contribute to the overall story and the tone and the feel that she's trying to convey in all of her books. And I think that that is so clear in this very small book, Ravishing the Heiress, which is one of my favorites in this series. I admit I didn't love the first book, Beguiling the Beauty. I felt like it was a little too angsty for me, and I love angst. I dearly love angst, but it was too angsty. They were too cruel to each other for too long, and we didn't get the happily ever after payoff that I wanted. But this book, however, worked for me completely. I loved this story. These 2 people who were sort of thrown together in this romance. We have the heroine Millie, who is deeply, deeply have feelings for who is going to be her husband, right? Just love at first sight, right? She feels that they're very deeply. I think that we as the reader can see that she's really more infatuated with him right in the beginning. And he, however, has very deep feelings for his childhood sweetheart, who he now realizes he's not going to be able to marry. And it's the very long, I mean, it's short, but it spans a lot of years of seeing these 2 people who are sort of thrown together into a marriage try to actually make that work. And as they become friends and then full-on romantic partners, it was just beautiful, heart-aching, and lovely. I will say that I know there are a lot of mixed opinions on this book. I think some people either really, really love it or they really don't like it at all. And I think that I can see how, like this is a series that I feel like if I recommend this to you and you don't love it, I will totally understand, because this isn't going to work for everybody. I think that you really have to, I don't know that you have to have anything, but I just, that wasn't what I wanted to say, but I do feel like this book specifically is not going to work for everyone, and that's okay, but there was something about the longing and just the pining for one another and Millie's sacrifice. I felt like she was just such a beautifully strong character. There were so many moments in this book that just like made my heart ache, that just made me feel so much. And that overpowered anything else for me. I just adored it. I love the 3rd book too, Tempting the Bride. Really, really love it. But this is unlike most historical romances that I've read. I don't feel like she's following a pattern. I don't feel like she's, it's not in the vein of any other historical romances that I've read. I think that she's doing something really unique, or she did do something really unique in this series, and it was just completely captivating, and I can't stop thinking about this book specifically. Just loved it. It's one of my favorite books of all time, it's one of those books that makes you hurt and makes you ache and makes you just want them to be together so badly. And then when they are, it's just perfection. So I loved it. Okay, another series that I recently finished in December, actually, is the Hathaway series by Lisa Kleypas. Now, I only have 3 books here. This is actually a 5-book series, but this is one of Lisa Kleypas' most beloved series, The Hathaways, and it's very fun, too, because you see characters in Mine Till Midnight, which is actually my favorite book in the series still, and it was way far back in my shelves. I couldn't find it. I'm sorry, but Mine Till Midnight is my favorite book in the series. Here I have the last 3 books in the series. These are all historical romances. These are, I think that this is probably, I think that this series overall is my second favorite series by Lisa Kleypas, more than the Wallflowers. So it goes Ravenel's, Hathaway's, and then Wallflowers for me. But this series is just such a beautiful story of this family who has really sort of had some tragedy dealt to it in that their parents passed away. There was an illness that swept through, and the heir, the son of the family, you know, his love was killed by this illness. They have a lot of tragedy that happened in their lives. One of the daughters, she was affected by this illness too and has sort of had a disability throughout her life. She's struggling to overcome that. And I mean, like, these books, most of these books are 5 stars for me. And they just, again, encapsulate what Lisa does so well. And she just creates these characters who just feel like they are meant to be together. There's so much, like, soulmate level love in this series. There's so much, like, longing. Like, you can just feel the passion that these characters have for one another. There is some very interesting characters in here. We have, this one is a great one because this is actually one of my favorites too. It's an epistolary romance, so they're writing letters back and forth, and a little bit of a hidden identity that is then revealed, and I loved that. A little bit of a quirky heroine in here too. And, like, again, like, Tempt Me at Twilight, this one I really loved too. This is a heroine who ends up marrying Harry, who is a hotel owner, and, just beautiful. This one is Catherine and Leo's story. Leo is the older brother, so he's sort of the heir, the lead of the family, I guess. This is his romance. And I don't have too, like, Mine Till Midnight is the beginning, and it's beautiful perfection, honestly. That's one of my all-time favorite Lisa Kleypas books. That book is so beautiful. Seduce Me at Sunrise is, again, that one features Wynne, the daughter who was ill and had some suffering because of that. That one, like, the hero in that book, Kev, he is an angst puppy, and he just, like, pines for the heroine, and he has a case of, I don't think I'm good enough for you, but I love you and I must have you. Like, they're just perfection. I love that series so much, and I was happy to have finished it, but also sad because now I don't get to experience it for the first time ever again. Now I have another historical romance series that I recently finished, and it is the Bedwins Saga by Mary Bellog. So this series, wow, I love this series so much. This is a series of 6 books, not including the prequels, and it is all about, again, a family where we have their parents have passed away, and we have the head of the family who is the Duke Wulfric, and you don't get his story until the very end. It's all about, like, each of the siblings. They each find a romance, and I feel like in the beginning, Slightly Married was the first book, and it has very much of some sort of common themes in historical romance where, you know, she needs to marry to survive, and he was a captain in the army, and he made a pact with one of his soldiers that he would look after his sister who passed away. That sister is the person that he comes back to marry. And all of these books take place, and they show you little glimpses of these siblings. It's a wonderful historical romance series that follows a family. I feel like if you really love that family vibe and sort of following along with that, like similar to the Hathaways, or even if you really love the Bridgerton series, that type of family, I think you would enjoy this too, because it has that same sort of soft, quiet family vibe of following them along and watching them fall in love. So I think that as we have, like, some books in here that are kind of have similar plots and tropes that we've seen in historical romance, others are completely different. And, like, one of my favorite books is actually Slightly Tempted. This is about Morgan Bedwin, and this is a story with her and this French, I don't know if he was a general, he served in the army too, and it's their romance, and this one is extremely a little bit angsty and heartbreaking, but she is just such a strong woman, and she has just this strength of spirit that she is going to take care of her family and take care of other people, but she wants to marry for love. Like, she's also got a strong sense of right and wrong. Like, she was just this, like, fantastic female character, and I just adored her story, and their romance, Also, this on audiobook was fantastic because you had a French accent for the hero. It was delightful. This one is probably my favorite book in the Bedouin saga, actually. I just loved the romance and the story that was being told here, and seeing other members of the Bedouin family show up here was great. But another book that was honestly pretty bonkers, had a bonkers plot, but that was super enjoyable, was Slightly Sinful. This we have a heroine who is not a prostitute, but she is living with a house of prostitutes, and they're trying to have enough money to make ends meet, and they don't know what to do because they're in a bit of a pickle, and so they decide to go and grave rob. Like, they're going to go rob graves or the bodies of soldiers who died in the war. And as they do that, the heroine actually finds the hero, who is a Bedouin, his body just completely unclothed. He's already been robbed and left for dead, but he's not dead. He's actually alive, and so she nurses him back to health. He has amnesia, and it's just like one of those plots that you're like, wow, that was interesting, but just like so good. So I think that if you really like more of a slower vibe in your historical romances, if you want something that is a little bit, like, I think these are comfort reads. Like, I just feel like there's just something so compelling that just draws me in about this family. I want to know what's happening with them. I think Mary Bellog is a beautiful, peaceful, very subtle writer, like, but they do have great passion in them. They have great romances. I love the sort of carefully unfolding stories that are being told in here, and I just adored it. I think this series is fantastic, and I want more people to read them, so. Okay, another series that I dearly, dearly love that is complete that I read last year. This series has been out for a while. Well, it started a while ago, but the last book just came out last year, and it is the Clifton Forge series by Devney Perry. This is a motorcycle club contemporary romance series. I became completely obsessed with this. The first book is Steel King. This is actually the second book, Riven Knight, and these are some of my favorites in the series. Again, I believe this is like a 6-book series. I can't remember. I'm bad at remembering numbers and details and things like that, but this series is very great. It's a small town romance motorcycle club, but it also has, most of these books have a really great mystery element to it and a little bit of threat of danger. Something might happen to some of the characters, but overwhelmingly, these are deeply romantic. Like, there's some really beautiful romances that are being told in here. Specifically, this one is my favorite. We have it's called Riven Knight. We have our hero who is damaged, who has had a lot of bad things happen to him. He's really dealing with some trauma, and the heroine is sort of, he's protecting her because bad people are coming to get her who murdered her mother. She's dealing with that loss, and they also worked together to put one of the bad guys down in the previous book, and so they form this bond because they shared that experience, and the hero is just so soft and protective with her. I just love this book so much. This was just compulsively readable for me. I really loved pretty much every book in this series. I don't think I gave anything lower than a 4-star. They were just enjoyable. I think I binged the series within a week. I freaking loved it and was obsessed with it. So highly recommend this entire series. This one is my favorite book in the series, though. Okay, and the last series that I want to talk about is one that I discovered because of my dear friend Jessin, who read, I think, the first book in this series just on a whim. She had picked up the audiobook, and she's like, wow, this is fantastic. And so as soon as possible, after I heard her talk about that, I immediately started it, and it is the Highland Magic series by Elisa Braden. Elisa Braden is an independent romance author, and I really, really love that. And I think that she, honestly, has Midnight in Scotland series. I think I called the series wrong. But anyway, Elisa Braden is an incredibly captivating writer. There's something about her writing that honestly makes it nearly impossible for me to stop reading them. I just don't want them to end. I pick these books up, and then I am captivated until I am at the last page. Like, I read this book the night that it came out. It dropped on my Kindle at like 10 p.m. This was just released. This is the last book in the series, and it's my favorite. It was just released at the end of December. This dropped on my Kindle at 10 o'clock the night before it was actually released, and I started reading it, and I didn't stop until I was finished, and I adored it. I think that if you're looking for some really great Highland romances and maybe you want something that is a little bit different than what has traditionally been published, I would just highly recommend this whole series. I think they're fantastic. This first one, we have a Scottish heroine, actually, and an English hero, and he needs to participate in these Highland games, and she needs to learn how to be a lady to try and secure a husband, and so they make a deal that she will teach him how to win these games if he teaches her how to be a lady. There's a little bit of magic in these series, too. Like, I feel like there's just a touch of, like, the other, or some little, just a hint of magic that makes them just really, really fun, and I feel like suits the story so well. I love this book very much. I loved this book even more, however. This one is The Taming of a Highlander, where we have our Highland hero who basically commits a crime to protect people, and the heroine ends up witnessing that, and so in order to protect him so he doesn't end up going to jail, they decide to marry, because the thought was that if you were married to them, you don't have to testify against them. And this book, like, this hero, he's so protective of the heroine. That's something that's kind of a trait in this book too. Extremely protective, just absolutely this big, strong man who sort of then finds himself not sure what to do with these tender and passionate and, like, big feelings he has for this woman, and, like, he can't let her know, right? It's just, like, so beautiful. This book is my absolute favorite. I love this couple so much. We have a heroine in here who's actually being stalked by a former suitor, and he is stalking her with some really threatening and scary ways, and so in order to protect her, she's friends with this Scottish family who's featured in the other books. They end up, this hero, ends up protecting her, taking her back to his house, and sort of being her bodyguard, and it was so swoony, you guys. It was so swoony, just, like, watching him go out of his way and sort of go out of his mind when she was, like, threatened or anything maybe happened to her. Like, it's literally my catnip. I love that so freaking much. I just adored this book. I loved this book. It was one of my favorites of last year. I did read it before the end of the year, so it made it to my favorite historical romances of the year. I just freaking loved it. I think Elisa Braden is an incredible writer, and honestly, she's now become an auto-buy author for me. Anytime I hear she's got a new release, I'm just like, one click. I don't even need to know what it's about. I'm going to buy it. So that's honestly how I feel like all of the authors, all of the book series that I've talked about in here. If I hear that one of these authors is coming out with a new book, I'm just like, oh, pre-order. We're going to need to buy that. So, all right, there you have it. Those are some of my favorite series that I've read recently and that I have deep feelings for, and I hope you give them a try, and if you do, let me know. And once again, I just want to say that I feel like sometimes I get comments on my videos where people are like, I really wanted to love this, but I just didn't, and I don't know why, like, what's wrong with me? And I just feel like, you know, book taste is subjective. Even if we have very similar tastes, you and I, sometimes that's not always going to match up, and that's totally okay. So while these are my favorite books, it is not a reflection on you or on me if you didn't like them. You know, it's just personal taste, personal life experience, that's it. So anyway, hope y'all enjoyed this video. Please feel free to leave me a flower, or a heart. I guess it's almost Valentine's Day. A heart or a flower, one of those, whatever you want. If you want to let me know you were here, and I'll see y'all in my next video.